I am obsessed with creating a cohesive color palette for my projects. And this obsession started because I didn't know how to create one. Establishing a color ramp at the very start of your design process is a game changer. It's no longer about eye-picking colors as you go, but building a deliberate, cohesive system. A color ramp is a spectrum of tints or lighter variations and shades or darker variations derived from a single base color. It's a visual representation of how any base color transitions from light to dark. But why the heck do you need a ramp? And why at the very beginning of a project, you may ask? Number one, if you're creating a design system, it helps establish your primitives. Having this set right from the get-go forces you to use only the defined colors, ensuring consistency in color usage. You avoid winging it every time you need a new shade. You have a nice palette you could hand off to engineers. An extended color palette helps assign colors for different elements like backgrounds, borders, text, icons, interactive states, and other assets. It also saves you a lot of time going forward with any project. Reading colors as HSL or HSB rather than hex greatly helps. I'll go with HSB for this post, as this is how I operate with colors. For the sake of brevity, I'll let you read this wonderful article, Color and UI Design, a Practical Framework by Eric Kennedy, for a deep dive into this. And let me tell you, this article is a must read. It's a great article that just opened new doors of understanding for me with regards to colors. I'll however give you a TLDR version of it. Our intention is to create light and dark versions of a base color. So if there's anything you could take away with regards to the HSB jargon, it's this. Create lighter variations or tints of the base color by increasing brightness and decreasing saturation. And create darker variations or shades by lowering brightness and increasing saturation. As for the hue, it is the color itself, a number between 0 to 360, telling you where you are on the color wheel. While creating the palette, it's okay if the hue is the same number across the spectrum. We could just tinker with the saturation and brightness to create different tints and shades. However, if you want to get granular with the hue as well, here's what Eric Kennedy writes in his post. The trick is to just make the movement of the hue match up with the movement of the saturation and brightness. So if you want a darker variation, move the hue towards red, green or blue, whichever is the closest, and vice versa. That is with cyan, magenta and yellow for lighter variations. You may have 3 or 4 types of colors. Your primary or the brand colors. This is the centerpiece of your palette used for major UI elements. Your accent colors, the complementary colors that support the primary color. Your grays, that is the neutrals for backgrounds, borders and text. And feedback colors, green for success, red for errors, yellow for warnings. You know the drill. It is recommended to create between 10 to 12 tints or shades for each color. But let us, for the sake of this example, stick to 10. Now each category would have one base color from which you would create your shades. Most probably that would be 500 in your palette. But this depends though. For this exercise, the color 0E61BA is the base brand color. So I'll take note of the HSB values. Hue 211, saturation 92 and brightness 73. This would be in the middle of the spectrum, maybe 500 or 600. You would want the darkest color in the spectrum to have a saturation of maybe 95 to 100 and a brightness of 15 to 30. And the lightest color would have a saturation of 5 to 10 and brightness of maybe 95 to 100. So with these 3 colors done, trust your eye and work your way between these points to create the intermediate tints and shades. Remember the HSB jargon we discussed before this. You create your lighter variations by increasing brightness and decreasing saturation, and you create darker variations by lowering brightness and increasing saturation. That being said, here's our brand blue palette, and the base color stands at 600. make all your colors in the palette cohesive, see to it that your other hues, that is your accent and your supporting colors, have more or less the same saturation and brightness of your brand color. Keep them within 5 to 10 points of each other and repeat the process that you did for your brand color palette. And like that, you would have a very cohesive color palette. Trust your eye for this. Creating grays can be tricky. It's essentially the same as creating the other colors, but we might need to play around a little bit to get things right. You would want grays to have the hue of the brand color, so the grays are a little cohesive with the brand rather than being too neutral. So with the same brand hue, the lightest gray would have, let's say, a brightness of 99 to 100 and a saturation of 0 to 3. And the darkest in the spectrum would have a brightness of 5 to 15 and a saturation of maybe 40 to 60. Note that the saturation significantly drops as compared to our other colors. Having too much of a saturation would make the darkest gray look too close to the blue spectrum, since we are maintaining the hue of our brand. With this done, you could work your way from the lightest to darkest. An alternative would be to use tools or plugins to generate your tints and shades. You plug the hex code of the color of your choice in a plugin and generate an extended palette. I usually use either of two plugins, Foundation Color Generator and Super Palette, for quickly having a palette generated. And I also love using the tool colorbox.io for this exercise. I've got great results and this has been my go-to tool for colors recently. Another great tool I should make a mention of is Atmos. In fact, I find myself using more of Colorbox and Atmos for my projects these days. You could also use well-crafted custom color palettes from websites and UI kits. The idea is to select color swatches closest to your brand, grays and supporting colors, and copy them to your Figma file. And some good sources would be Tailwind CSS, Radix, and Untitled UI. A hybrid approach is easy and fast as well. Use existing palettes or generate one with plugins and then manipulate values to your liking. In fact, I find creating neutral palettes quite difficult. And a good way of generating a neutral palette is to get a nice ready-made palette from Tailwind CSS. And then tweaking the hue value to match the brand in your project. This would be a lot easier. So generating a color palette is a tough task, honestly, and requires a lot of tweaking. And don't stress if it's not perfect the first time. Keep tweaking, keep experimenting, keep learning.